Okay, welcome to this GCSE Component 1 RS Themes Unit, Issues of Life and Death. This is video 4, when we're thinking about the medical ethics issues of abortion and euthanasia. Having talked about previously the sanctity of life, the quality of life, the ideas of evolution, and how the origins of the whole universe, and how all of these are related. So what is abortion? Well, it can be variously defined. The deliberate ending of a pregnancy, so it does not end in the birth of a child, is a reasonable definition. Pro-life people will talk about it as murder. It's the killing of an unborn child. Pro-choice people would talk about it as just the termination of a pregnancy. So abortion was legalized in 1967. Since then, the issue has been widely debated. The arguments that led up to 1967 included the claim that there were tens of thousands of backstreet abortions, and maybe that number was right, maybe it wasn't right, maybe it was exaggerated. Certainly there were some, maybe 2,000 or 3,000. Whether there was 20 or 30,000, hard to say. Watch the film Vera Drake is a pro-choice film about the creation of the Abortion Act in 1967. And it's a very emotive film about the danger of backstreet abortions. So, on the one hand, it's immoral to kill unborn babies. On the other, the quality of life for women who have to raise the children is important. If the child is going to be born extremely disabled as well, that's an issue with extreme pain. So do we use quality of life arguments? Do we use sanctity of life arguments? So the pro-life view is that abortion is just wrong. It is murder. It is taking the sixth commandment literally. Do not kill, and it's an act of killing. And the claim is every living thing has a right to life. Now, the Catholic view, based on natural moral law, is the primary precept of natural moral law is the preservation of life. The application in terms of abortion is don't do abortions. So typically the Catholic Church is very much against abortion. The pro-choice movement would say abortion, of course, is acceptable, that they would deny that the fetus is an unborn baby. They would claim that it's the right of the mother or the woman off the bed to do with her body what she likes. And if the situation necessitates an abortion, it's maybe very sad, but something that should be permitted for women and helped for women. And harsh and terrible cases, things are cited, i.e. pregnancy due to rape. Now, there are about 200,000 abortions in the UK every year. Possibly some of those are to do with rape, but very small percentage. Most of them are because of inconvenience. It's just not convenient. You want to have your career, you want to get on in life, you don't want to be hindered by bringing up a child, and so things like mental health are stated as the reason for the abortion. So does the unborn child have rights? The law is actually quite unclear about the rights of the unborn child, if their rights are distinguishable or not from the rights of the mother. And in the UK, the law is backwards and forwards in this, but it's a little bit more liberal. It's saying the child is not a person. So my niece, who was born at 23 weeks, was not a person. Interesting that. So what do Christians believe about abortion? Well, first of all, what is the case? In the UK at the minute, you can have an abortion up to 24 weeks, and in theory at least. If two doctors agree and there is significant risk for the mother's mental health, there's the key one, then they would sign off on it. In rare cases, and is it rare, there are third trimester abortions. Now, the number of third trimester abortions is really contested, and there possibly more of them happen than we know about. How many women will have abortions? Some think 1 in 3. I think that's quite high. There's about 200,000 abortions happen each year in the UK. It's hard to believe that's 1 in 3. women in the UK. So if there's 70,000 people in the UK, 70 million people, 35 million of them women, not quite 1 in 3. So anyway, Roman Catholics, so the father of the fetus has no legal rights in the UK at present, even if the couple are married. So the group that is most prominent in being actively against abortion, in, for example, the pro-life group SPUC, the Society for Protection of Unborn Children, are Roman Catholics. Abortion is just forbidden in Roman Catholic teaching. Life is sacred, it's a gift from God, and to take life would be to go against Thomas Aquinas' natural moral law precept of preservation of life. Life begins, the Catholic Church teaches, at conception. You're not a potential life, you're a life, you are a human being with potential. God ensouls each of us, creates the soul at conception. So the first precept of natural moral law is the key here for Aquinas. It's also against the Ten Commandments, do not kill. The fetus has Catholics claim, a right to life, a right to develop, and terminating the pregnancy is a great evil, great moral evil. Church of England Christians differ on this. There are pro-life Church of England Christians and pro-choice Church of England Christians. And certainly there are other denominations that are much more liberal. Typically in the Church of England, they permit it for some cases, including the case of rape. Abortion is permitted. Quality of life should be considered, and compassion, do for others as you want them to do for you. However, the law of Britain is too liberal when it comes to abortion, is generally the attitude of the Church of England. In the past, abortion has been carried out for immoral reasons, as when it's used as a form of contraception. Now, some churches are way more liberal. The Methodist Church talks about if there are oppressive social circumstances, then it's okay to have an abortion. It says that in its report on abortion, the fetus is not without significance, but significance grows in the pregnancy. So if it's a very early abortion, it's sad, but it's perfectly fine if there are oppressive social circumstances. So there's no one single view on abortion in Christianity. Some Christians give priority to the belief in the sanctity of life. Some talk about life in all its fullness, and that sort of quality of life statement. It's a pro-abortion view from Christians. We should follow Jesus' teaching to live life with all its fullness and to show compassion to those who have been raped, or that sort of argument would be made for the pro-choice Christians. Humanists, of course, have no real problem with abortion. It's sad but necessary in our society. We need to consider the evidence, the probable consequences, the rights and wishes of everyone involved to make a decision about abortion. The kindest course of action would be to do the least harm. Because of this situational approach to ethics, no one has a right or wrong answer. Generally, humanists take a liberal pro-choice stance. What would produce the most happiness, to abort or keep the baby? Nobody asks particularly about the happiness of the baby. Does what it want? The quality of life outweighs the preservation of life on the humanist view. So abortion is morally acceptable so long as people are making informed choices and considering the short-term and long-term effects. So this idea of situation ethics is a liberal Christian view, often used as well by humanists. What is the most loving thing to do in a case-by-case basis? And we would say it depends on the situation. Euthanasia. What is euthanasia? Euthanasia means easy or gentle death. Mercy killing for someone who's suffering perhaps serious, painful illness and is nearing death. There are different types. Voluntary or assisted suicide, where a person explicitly asks for help to die because they have a life-limiting or terminal illness typically. Not always. Active euthanasia, when a person takes a course of action to end their life, an overdose. Passive, when life-sustaining treatment is removed, i.e. feeding tube or a respirator, when there's no hope of recovery. And involuntary, where death is forced on a person, for example, during the ethnic cleansing by the Nazis in the Second World War, or just before it, or the death sentence. So, why would you want to end your life? Well, people who are pro-choice want what they describe dignity in dying. is the name of what was the Voluntary Euthanasia Society. They don't want the last stage of their life and illness to take away their dignity. They want to kill themselves before they reach those last stages. So I'm afraid of the last stages of brain degenerative disease, for example. So some are afraid of living with constant unimaginative pain linked to an injury or disability or side effect from previous illness. And these are the reasons why they would want an abortion. Final stage of human life could take away dignity, amongst other things. And some people would rather not experience this. So they would claim quality of life arguments. It's my life, the principle of autonomy. I can choose what I like to do with my life. I want a quality of life, so I'm going to choose to end before it's taken, the quality of life is taken away. Things that have come about recently, the idea of a living will, where you write a legal document that says, in this situation, I do not want to be, brought back from a difficult illness. Instructs doctors to do not resuscitate, DNR, or intubate, put a tube down the throat, or any other artificial methods to keep a person alive. So DNRs, or do not resuscitate orders, are a type of living will, and some people get it tattooed or in bracelets and that sort of thing. Now in Britain, euthanasia is not legal in the sense of voluntary assisted suicide, where you do something active to help the other person. It's illegal. Depending on the situation, it's considered manslaughter or possibly murder, punishable by law, the maximum penalty of life imprisonment. Assisted suicide is also illegal in terms of the Suicide Act, 1961, and it's punishable by 14 years in prison. Attempting to kill yourself is not itself, however, a criminal act. But that's not the full story. The Director of Public Prosecutions decides whether to take someone to court for assisting in a suicide. The DPP said in 2010 it would be unlikely that someone would be prosecuted if the victim has reached a voluntary, clear, settled, informed decision to commit suicide. The suspect was wholly motivated by compassion. And this has been borne out in case after case. So in Britain, you can make law by Parliament, or you can make it by case law. And gradually through case law, euthanasia is being legalized in our country. So here are the kind of conversations we might have. Stephen Hawking said, we don't allow animals to suffer, so why humans? Interestingly, born out of his view, perhaps later on in his life, his own degenerative disease. This guy on the left says, I have a degenerative disease. I want control how I die. This is a matter of free will and maintaining my dignity. It's ethically wrong to keep someone alive with no hopes of recovery on expensive life support treatment. On the other hand, some Christians argue legalizing euthanasia may put pressure on vulnerable and elderly commit suicide if they feel they are becoming a burden. Or worse, they could feel obliged to end their life. Harold Shipman gave a lethal injection of morphine to his patients. Legalizing doctor-assisted suicide would make it easier for people like Shipman to commit this sort of horrible crime. In addition, euthanasia is legalized. The drive to research cures for terminal illness would lessen. You don't have to solve these problems. You can just take a pill. And this is a slippery slope. Once we allow doctor-assisted suicide, other practices will become legal. Involuntary euthanasia would become non-voluntary euthanasia. You would be helped to die against your will. And this would be, of course, immoral. One important alternative is the hospice. For Christians, Dame Cicely Saunders founded the hospice movement after the Second World War because of her objection to what the Nazis were doing between the wars. I'll talk about that in a second. So euthanasia is not the only option. The hospice is where someone with terminal illness can be someone who dies with dignity. Your illness can be managed. A hospice focuses on relieving the symptoms of the pain of the terminal illness. It doesn't try and cure the illness. Hospices are a type of pastoral care that focus on palliative or pain relief care for the sufferer, professional pain relief. Hospices can be religious in ethos because they have a clear connection to religious ideas and practices. In fact, most are. Think of your local hospice shop, and that's what it's doing. acting with kindness and compassion to raise funds for people who go to hospices. Hospices fulfill Christian desire to support the suffering with both patients and family in the final moments of their life. Patients and believers can preserve the sanctity of their life and can benefit from a quality of life towards the end of their life. For some Christians, palliative care and hospice provide the best of both sides of the argument. So now there are over 260 hospices in the UK. Some are dedicated to the care of children and infants, others to adult end of care life. Patients do not only go to hospices to die, some patients are admitted for short periods of time to help manage pain or relieve other symptoms of illness. Around 4% of deaths occur in hospice settings, many more patients and their families benefiting from time spent in hospice before their death. So what are Christian attitudes to euthanasia? Well, liberal Christians say we have to live life to the full, as Jesus said. He said, I've come that may have life and life to the full. And some, especially the Methodist Church, would say euthanasia might be acceptable if the person is, well, first of all, brain dead, and most Christians would accept that. Under such circumstances, it would be okay. But on a sort of lesser level, it might be okay to withdraw and withhold treatment that is prolonging painful illness. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean intensive treatment? Does it mean withdrawing food and water? Well, liberal Christians would point out, do for others as you want them to do for you. Do the most loving thing, agape. You must use the word agape in this essay. Show compassion for others. Give agape. Conservative Christians would be skeptical. Yes, on some occasions, passive euthanasia, where you withdraw food and water, is letting nature take its course. But life is sacred, and we're told not to kill. Life is a gift from God. Therefore, taking life is playing God, taking that which is precious, a gift. Suffering can have a purpose. The book of Hebrews says that we should trust God when we are suffering. That God will give us the ability to cope with suffering. And the alternative is hospice care, where patients can die with dignity and their pain can be managed. Humanist attitude to euthanasia. Well, the Voluntary Euthanasia Society, or now as it's called Dignity in Dying, argues for legalizing assisted suicide, voluntary euthanasia across the UK. They believe that assistance should not be limited to terminally ill people, but we want to see reform in the law. So if you just feel like your life is worth nothing, you can be assisted to die. So this reform would consider the needs of people who are permanently and incurably suffering. For people, for example, people who are paralyzed. Humanists hold the right to life, but they don't believe that life should be prolonged in the face of pointless suffering. Being able to die with dignity is a further step in a manner of our choosing. There's the principle of autonomy. Must be understood to be a fundamental right. So autonomy and the quality of life being key principles for advocates of this, like Peter Singer, who's a great advocate of euthanasia. So stop the video there and make your revision notes on this last topic, abortion and euthanasia. Do the topic revision tests, do some practice questions, and so on.